I'll go back here for a second. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Charla from ID at Xbox. I'm going to talk quickly about some lessons we've learned, especially about PC and just digital publishing in general since we launched ID, and then open it up for Q&A pretty quickly. So what is ID? ID is a digital publishing program that Microsoft started in 2013 to help developers ship their games on Xbox One and Windows PCs. And really just to provide an on-ramp to all parts of the Microsoft ecosystem for developers. It was exciting to start, and it's gone pretty well so far. Like, I won't read all these stats, but we've got more than 1,000 games shipped. Developers have earned way more than that paid out through the store. So we've got a really nice, sustainable marketplace on Xbox One that enables developers to make games, sell games. Obviously, video games are a hit-driven business, but developers have seen like really astounding success on Xbox One. So it's been super satisfying. What's next from us? We're going to keep going with ID at Xbox till the sun burns out, if I have anything to do with it. But one thing Microsoft's been doing is a deeper focus on PC games. And where that really came through was in Microsoft Game Stack, which we kind of announced at GDC. And basically, you can see we've put together some things. We basically put together all of our things that are game-related for developers, but some things that we bought recently, like Havoc and Azure PlayFab, Simplegon, and really working to make sure that all these things for development, whether it's developing on PC for console or developing on PC for PC, really work together, and that there's like one place you can go to learn everything you need. And the one I'd probably just hit on the most is just Azure PlayFab. They're actually out in the corridor there. It's a really nice, actually, I would say fantastic back-end and live op system for games, so definitely would encourage you guys to check that out. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but we have a process if you want to get your game out. It's pretty straightforward. But what I do want to talk about is now just some lessons that we've learned from our digital sales data. A lot of this is Xbox specific, but I think a lot of it applies to a lot of different marketplaces. But first off, we've seen that release date really matters a lot. On console, even the day of the week is really important. So on Xbox One, retail games tend to ship on Tuesdays, digital games tend to ship on Wednesdays and Fridays. I mention this because we'll let you ship your game any day of the week you want, but Friday is the best day to ship your game because most people buy games over the weekend, and having your game in new releases is the best time to ship it. That said, we tell everybody Friday is the best day to release, so Wednesday is a pretty good day too, because then it's a little less crowded. So we're always trying to let people know like all that information. The main thing we tell people, if you're releasing a digital-only game, is just don't ship it on a Tuesday. That's the day all the retail games come out. You'll just get pushed out of new releases by sort of all the different special editions and everything like that. I think this is crucial for digital game developers. Box art matters a lot. No matter what, no matter who you are, when your game ships, most of the people who see it in a digital storefront will have never heard of it before. No matter how good of a job you've done, this is just axiomatic to the way digital games work. You need to have a really arresting box art image. It's also really important in this. I talk a little bit about other stores down there. Design for the store you're being shown in. If you're designing a box art for Steam or you're arm's length from the monitor, you can expect people are going to see a lot more detail on that box image than if you're designing for Xbox One or PS4 where you're 10 feet away from the image. Switch, people are probably going to be holding it in their hand like 8 inches from their eyes, but the box is shaped differently on Switch than it is on Xbox and on Steam. So think about that. Don't be afraid to change the art for each platform to make sure that each platform has the best art, because that box art is the most crucial thing to get customers who haven't heard of the game before. Next one is making sure that you focus on your screenshots and videos. Again, once you can get people to look at the box art, the next most important thing is going to be getting them to buy the game. That's what screenshots and videos are going to do. There's always this temptation at the time when you're populating your marketplace, whether it's on Xbox or any other platform, is always a time in development when you are just most run ragged, you most just want it to be over, and there's this temptation to say oh, I need 8 screenshots for Xbox. Just hit the spacebar 8 times. I don't care what they are. Great, now it's done. We can ship. And you will just destroy your sales. You will just absolutely destroy your sales in the platform. I can tell you, we look really closely at this in terms of who clicks on the box and gets to, on Xbox, it's called the game details page, and then who goes from the game's details page to go on to actually convert to a sale, and the quality of the screenshots matters a lot there. You should spend an enormous amount of effort making sure that you have great screens there. On Xbox, the screens kind of show up in a carousel. You can't exactly pick which one's going to be first. Different consoles work differently, but just make sure the screenshots that you can get there the best you can. And we definitely noticed a sales correlation between people who upload the maximum number of screenshots and sales. So if you upload less than the maximum number of screenshots on any platform, or at least certainly on Xbox, you will see a decrease in sales relative to a game that has uploaded the maximum number of screenshots and videos. On Xbox especially, but I would say everywhere, don't use like sexy box art. First of all, 2 reasons. It gets people to click on the box, but they don't buy the game. Like, it hurts sales of the game. And 2, is gross. And if you do an Xbox, we won't promote you. So don't do that. Hopefully that's not a big deal anymore. Be smart about pricing. Try and price similarly on all platforms. I would say launch discounts is something to think really strongly about. And when I say think really strongly about, like think really strongly about not doing it. Here's the reason. If somebody is into your game and they want to check out your game and they already have made that purchase decision because you've reminded them when the game's coming out and they're kind of already cemented, they're just going to buy the game. Getting 10% off isn't going to do anything except for take 10% off the table. So I strongly encourage you to think about not doing a launch discount. If you're strongly encouraged to do one on one platform, for one reason or another, then I would say do it everywhere so you're not disadvantaging anyone. But we haven't seen launch discounts do much. Next, just treat all the stores differently, whether it's Steam or Epic or us or PlayStation. As I mentioned before, every store is unique. Every store needs its own strategies. The day that retail games come out is different on Xbox and other systems. Just think about that, and hopefully you have somebody on your team, or you can take a day to think about it and just research how the different stores work, and treat them differently. I mean, obviously you've got a global launch strategy, which is hopefully to sim ship, as many places as you can, but definitely remember that every store is unique. And don't be afraid to call the platform holders and just bug them until they talk to you. Microsoft, I think we're pretty easy to approach to talk about store things. We do a lot of talks about stores and maximizing your sales, and I assume the other platforms do as well. When you're building comps, too often I think people look at the best case scenario for their given genre or art style. Look at low, mid, and best as you're trying to build comps. And also don't just comp on genre, comp on time of year it was released, comp on art style, comp on how big the download is, comp on price, comp on a lot of different vectors to give you comps. And the reason you want to do a comp is not just because you just want to, it's just to help you understand how well your game might do, and that can help inform development decisions that you make about, do I get that extra artist, do I not get that extra artist, that kind of thing. This next point is really important. What we see on Xbox, and I think this is true on a lot of different platforms, is that the long trail is really real. And even in this generation on Xbox, how players buy games and how players interact with games has changed dramatically. We did a bunch of research, and I apologize, I don't have a slide about it, but what we found was the impact of like launch day and launch week is actually getting lower. But the impact of tail sales is actually growing. So we looked at 2 different games, and these games are as close to the same as we could get. They're both games that Microsoft did not put a lot of marketing into, so they're just organic marketing. They were both 4-star user reviews, no DLC, story-based games that were $20. Okay, the only difference is one came out in 2015 and one came out in 2017. or late 2016, something like that. They were 2 years apart. So the first one did double the day one sales, double the week one sales, double the month one sales. This was a game that came out in like 2015 of the game that came out in 2017. But when we looked at the numbers, it had been about 2 years since the second game came out. They had done exactly the same revenue. It was like I don't know, a couple $1,000,000 or something like that, and. But so that means that the second game that came out 2 years later did the same revenue with half the launch in half the time. And we looked at it, and it was just tail. It was all tail, and it was all like sales that were post 6 months were like 2 or 3 times higher than the game that had come out a couple years before. We're seeing that over and over again. I don't know if there's something changing in the way that we as humans consume media and consume content today, where buying something later is no big deal. I know that if you talk about Game of Thrones, you can talk to somebody and they might say like, I haven't started watching it yet, and but the implication is that even though this thing is like, I don't know, 10 years old or however, like they might start anytime, and that's kind of like an acceptable way to consume content today. I think the same thing might be becoming more true of games, which is why we're seeing more sales in the tail phase and less in the launch phase, but it's really something to think about. But I think the lesson for us as developers, or for you guys as developers, is never stop marketing your game. Never stop promoting your game, because it will keep selling for a really, really long time. Last one, this data is just dramatic. If you do DLC or you do updates to the game, free updates, paid updates, whichever, it meaningfully affects the sales of your base game. The sooner you can get a piece of DLC out there, the better. When somehow there seems to be some psychological thing, and that when people see that there's DLC available for a game, it makes them feel like the game is more supported and more loved, both by the developer and by the community, and it seems like it maybe makes it a little bit easier to make that purchase decision. And lastly, all these lessons are about selling more games, and that's something that, where our interests and your interests as developers are really closely aligned. I just want to make it clear that on Xbox, we're excited to have games on Xbox, and we don't care how they sell in the nicest possible way. So you feel free to ignore all these rules. There's lots of different definitions of success as a developer. There's commercial success, which I think is the one where our interests align, but there's also artistic success, personal success, whatever. So feel free to ignore these rules, but just for sales success, these are things to really think about. Next one, just in terms of the current landscape, there is so much investment happening right now in independent games, or call them AA PC games, and I don't mean that qualitatively, I just mean that in terms of like a size and scope sense. There is ridiculous amounts of investment happening right now. You will, if you're making a game like that, you are probably going to get opportunities for investors. And there's just a couple things to think about. So just make sure you're getting what you need from an investment. Investments are probably going to, especially the investments that are going on right now, as they're starting to be like store wars on PC and subscription wars here and there, they will probably reduce your ability to ship other places, right? They will reduce your flexibility as a developer to ship your game where you want to. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a thing, so definitely think about it. And I think for console developers who've been working in this world where, there's this, kind of ongoing competition between Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo, it's kind of normal. But I think for PC developers, some of this might be new. So just think about what you want from a deal. Think about what you need from a deal to consider it a success. It's so, and I know because I used to be a developer, it is so flattering when somebody offers you a bunch of money for your game that there's like this temptation to just sign immediately because like, oh my God, this dude's just offered us like $1 million. But it turns out you need actually $3 million to ship, and the $1 million keeps you off the best, marketplace. It's tricky. So just make sure you're getting what you need before you sign. All deals involve trade-off. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for carve-outs if there's something you want. If you want to make sure you get to ship on Switch, or you want to make sure you can be in a subscription program, don't be afraid to ask for that, even if it's not in the initial offer that the folks give you, because you would be amazed at how flexible people can be during negotiations. This is just some quick pitch tips. It was really for talking to us, but I think it's for talking to anybody. I won't run through all these. You can take a picture of it if you want. I think the most important thing for when you're pitching is just be confident. There was this huge thread on Twitter a little while ago about how to dress during pitches, and my thing is, I can tell you at Microsoft, we don't care how you dress. Like, we've never signed a game because somebody dressed well, or not signed a game because somebody was dressed sloppily. We just care about the game. I mean, take a shower, wear deodorant, all that kind of stuff, but really just be confident. I think the key things is have a really good sense of your elevator pitch. Be able to explain your game. Be focused. Don't try and just use every buzzword that's popular right now. If you're pitching a card game, don't be like, but it's also a battle royale. But it's all, you don't have to do that. Don't be wishy-washy. Like, if you will get questions during pitches that you have no idea what the answers for. Don't try and design the game in the room after the person asks you a question. Like, everybody knows that's what you're doing. Just say, like, we haven't thought about that. We'll get back to you. If there's a question that turns out to be a deal breaker in the follow-up, the people are going to tell you they need an answer to it. Make sure you keep your pitch on the gameplay, why the gameplay is cool. Unless you're pitching an adventure game, we don't need to know a lot about the backstory or lore. Like, we'll learn about that during the process. I would also say listen when you pitch, read the room. It's always good to have a couple people in the room because you never know who's going to click with who, and you can, if you've got a couple people pitching, you can just let somebody else start to talk if you feel like you're not clicking. This kind of goes back to the other thing. It's okay to not have all the answers in a pitch. Don't feel like you need to make things up or anything like that. If you've got a demo, that's the best. Like, this really is, for us at least, this is the best thing. Like, a demo is always better than a video, is always better than just concept art, is always better than words. That said, like, at Microsoft, we've done projects with people based on all four of those things. It just kind of depends. And the other thing I'd say is to just make sure that you practice your pitch early and often, and not so that you sound scripted, but so that you're comfortable, so that when you go in the room, it's not about like, oh my God, now I'm pitching, I need to say these words, I don't know what to do with my hands. It's just so that when you go in the room, you're confident, you know your game is rad, you know you love your game, and just being able to bring that passion to the room and have a conversation about your game versus, trying to like read like a, formal speech or something like that. Last thing I would say is wherever you're pitching, there is probably going to be one person, a woman or man, who's going to be the person who really wants to sign your game. They usually can't get it over the line, but they're the person who makes sure the game gets brought up in meetings and everything like that, and typically called the champion. Find a good champion for if you want to get a game signed, whether it's with an investor or a platform holder or a store operator. It's going to be crucial. There's a great talk from GDC by Nick Sutner that was at this GDC. It's in the vault now. About finding an internal champion. So I definitely encourage people to try and find that talk and check it out. Hopefully you guys all have Vault accounts or have friends. I don't know. So those are just some quick pitch tips. I'd just say what to expect after a pitch. Usually silence. You're going to have to do a lot of follow-up. More questions, more meetings. Once people start to ask for details about budgets and timelines, you should start to feel like maybe it's time to start feeling good. Yeah, that's it. And with that, I will take some Q&A.
Those questions. Right, I'll run like those. Obviously, you deal with a lot of first-time indie devs, I'm sure, who are coming up to you and trying to pitch their game ideas. Without shaming anybody, what's the most common mistake you see indie devs make? What's the thing that catches them off guard that they are not expecting?
I will say that probably trying to talk too much about details of the game that aren't really important, like, oh, we've got a great options system, or like everybody who's pitching in some sense is pitching against their weaknesses. They know where they're the weakness, and that's what the weakest, and that's what they want to talk about because to explain away. But like, so I think that's actually kind of a mistake that people make. But I would say just like focusing on the lore and the backstory of the game versus focusing on just like the fact that it's a third-person action adventure, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Let's see if we can get a couple more of these, and you were next, I think. There.
So on the screen where you had like lessons you learned, maybe a third of those were about the box art and the videos and screenshots. Yeah. You seem to have a lot of data on that. Do you have any data on the difference between whether they're taking screenshots of maybe a cinematic or actual gameplay?
It should be gameplay.
should be gameplay.
Yeah, you might want to have like one cool cinematic screen, but most of the screen should be gameplay, because by the time the person is looking at the screens, they are like, I'm about to buy, and they want to know what the game is like.
Right. Yeah, because I feel like that sometimes myself. For example, if I'm on Steam and I see this game that I've never seen before, I want to see what the game actually looks like.
That's right. You don't want to see cutscenes, and you don't want to see the start menu, and you don't want to see the options screen. You just want to see like gameplay.
Cool. I think I saw one other hand up. Shall we do it? Oh, there we go. Let's do it. And then I'll make that the last question.
You mentioned comping against games of similar download size. I've heard that advice for mobile, but never for core games before. Do you find it matters?
We're not sure. Just to be totally honest, we haven't done enough research to know yet. It's something we're looking at, especially as download sizes get bigger, whether or not there's a negative correlation with big download size and sales. But it's enough. Like, we've looked at it briefly. I can't give you any conclusions, but it's enough of a thing that we've thought about that we think that it's worth looking at when you're doing comps.